one step further, and instead of keeping these things in terms of components, you can write these in vector notation. Okay, so I will remove this. So this is nothing but the divergence of V. Okay. This I am writing it in terms of vector notation. Okay, del P del x alpha will just be grad of P, and this will be nothing but grad of phi. Okay. So we will come back to these equations again, but there is just a few things which you can note here. Yeah, so let us remind ourselves what are the assumptions which have gone in deriving these equations. Number one, these equations are valid only for pressure-less fluids like dark matters and baryons, whose at least average pressure is negligible. Okay, so these are valid for non-relativistic particles, for example. Number two, this equation is valid only in the linear limit. Okay, so we have taken the perturbations to be much smaller than the average values. And the third one is that these equations are valid only for small scales, scales which are much smaller than the horizon or the Hubble radius. So these are very good approximations if you plan to study galaxy formation. But this also tells us that for studying galaxy formation, most of the time, it is just enough to deal with Newtonian mechanics. So what I will do is, next I will just start with the fluid equations valid for Newtonian mechanics and show that they also give you the same equations, so nothing else. Okay, so it is, so these we have got from relativistic perturbation theory, where we actually perturb the metric. But now what we will do is we will derive the same thing using Newtonian fluid mechanics, which is much easier to deal with, and it gives us, I mean, not only linear, but suppose you want to study nonlinear perturbation, it is much easier to do it using Newtonian perturbation. There is just one point which I have to make, which is that these equations have to be supplemented by one more equation. These equations are not enough to complete the story, which has to do with the 0,0 component of the Einstein's equation. So if you go back to the 0,0 component of the Einstein's equation, take the same limits, okay? I mean, you take the linear limit, you take the limit k going to infinity, and everything else which we have done. What you will end up with is an equation which will look like this. So this I haven't derived, but you should be able to do it. Okay. So what is this equation? Yeah, this is nothing but the Poisson equation. Okay. So of course, the general relativistic version of this equation is much more complicated. There are extra terms. But when you take the limit, the small scale limit, linear perturbation, actually this equation is always linear, there is no problem. So you have to just take the small scale limit and you will end up with this. Okay. So let us now get back to the Newtonian fluid and just see what we have there. So if there is a fluid which can be described using Newtonian mechanics, so in other words, I am neglecting all relativistic effects. Again, I am stressing that this is valid only if we are dealing with scales which are much smaller than the size of the horizon. We will end up with essentially three equations. First one is rho dot plus divergence of rho times, writing it as capital V equal to 0. This is called the continuity equation. Remember, these are, there is no approximation which has gone in this equation. It's not like they are linear or perturbed or anything. This will hold at every point in space and every instance of time. And there will be something called the Euler equation. So continuity equation is essentially mass conservation. So if you take a volume, if the density or amount of matter is changing, which is this rho dot, then there should be mass flowing in or flowing out of that volume. This is the physical interpretation of this equation, nothing else. Similarly, you will have an equation which will say V dot plus V dot should be equal to minus graph. This is known as the Euler equation. So the physical interpretation of Euler equation is nothing but it is like Newton's law, your force equation. The left hand side is nothing but dv dt. So this is del v del t plus v dot del of v. You can think of this as dv dt, total time derivative of v. Okay, so this is the acceleration term, and that is essentially driven by the gravitational force, which is minus grad phi. Okay, and if there is pressure, there is this extra term. Okay, so pressure can also make particles accelerate. So this is the only term you may not have seen. This is the term which comes in if you put in the pressure of the fluid. Other than that, this is just the force equation. And the third equation is nothing but the Poisson equation, which is del square phi equal to 4 pi g rho. So just to define, V in this thing is nothing but the velocity of the fluid. Okay. R is what is known as the physical or proper coordinate. So this is the actual coordinate of the fluid. And all these gradients are taken with respect to the coordinate r. So since I will be introducing a new coordinate very soon, let me put some subscripts here. So these gradients are taken with respect to the r coordinate. That's all. Now in cosmology or in structure formation, it is often useful to introduce a coordinate which is known as the comoving coordinate. So you can write r as a scale factor times some other coordinate x. So what is the interpretation of this x? So this is the coordinate. So suppose you take some particles or some galaxies which are like expanding with the universe. Okay? The universe is expanding and they are also expanding just like the universe. Then what will happen is these particles or galaxies will move away from each other and the distance will increase just like a, right? Because that is how the space-time is increasing. So if the particles are not moving, the only movement they have is in terms of the expansion of the space, then for those particles x will be constant. Okay? So they will just be stretched because of this a factor. But then that's not all, right? These particles can act gravitationally. For example, the nearby galaxies which we see like Andromeda is actually falling towards us because there the gravity has won. But the galaxies which are far away are moving away from us with this a factor. So depending on where they are and how much gravity acts on them, this x will not be a constant. But what happens is if I write in this way, then what is happening is r contains the effect of gravity as well as expansion. X actually takes the effect of expansion out. Okay? So if If there is only expansion, x won't change. If there is a change in x, which means there is some gravitational or some perturbative effects which are playing a role. So that is the advantage of using x. So if that is the case, then the parameter v, capital V, you can show that it is nothing but a dot by a times r plus a times dx dt. Is this fine? Okay. Now you will realize what I have been saying, that if you for the moment neglect this term, the first term is nothing but the standard Hubble's law, V equal to HR. That is what we expect, particularly in the non-relativistic limit. Plus you have this extra term. Okay? That is giving you what is known as the peculiar velocities. So this velocity is known as peculiar velocity. So over and above the Hubble expansion, if you have some extra motion, that we call peculiar. So this is known as peculiar velocity, and if you go back to the morning's class, you will see that this I have denoted by V. Okay, if you remember V, I had defined it in terms of as dx d eta, okay, which is nothing but a times dx dt. So this is V, and this is known as peculiar velocity. Peculiar velocity. Okay. And this small v is the same small v which we have been using in the morning. So let us define, let us use the definitions which we have, which we had written in the morning. So we had said that there is a quantity called density contrast, which is nothing but rho by rho bar minus 1, where rho bar is the kind of average density, correct? And then we had introduced a perturbed pressure, which is nothing but total pressure minus E bar. And similarly, here I have to introduce a perturbed phi, which is the total potential minus some average potential. Okay. And obviously V is this, A dot by AR plus small v. So now I have to just manipulate these equations. So what I have to do? I have to write rho V phi p, all these quantities in terms of the perturbed ones. Okay, not only that, I have to change all these derivatives to corresponding x. Okay, so these are derivatives taken with respect to the r coordinate. I have to just change it to x. So this is again some few lines of mathematics, but if you do it carefully, you will get the equations which I am going to write. Okay. So I will just write those equations. So just be careful, often people tend to make a mistake that since I have made, so what I have done is you go from r to x, which is related by this equation, but t is unchanged, t remains t. Okay. So often people tend to make a mistake, they just, whenever there is a del rho del t or del v del t term, they just tend to retain that. But if you think carefully, actually del del t will also go to something else when you make this coordinate transformation. Why and how I will leave for you to decide. This is just simple variable transformation and how to take partial derivatives. But that is a standard mistake one makes. So just make sure you do this correctly when deriving those equations. If you do it correctly, you will get the correct equations obviously. So what you end up with is these equations. Delta dot plus 1 by k divergence of 1 plus delta v equal to 0 v dot plus dot by AV plus gradient of phi gradient of E rho r, and then there is a Poisson equation. Okay, so we'll end up getting these three equations. So these are equations in terms of the perturbed quantities. The only difference with the equations I derived in the morning is that I haven't yet made the linear approximation. So these are fully nonlinear perturbation equations. Okay, so even when the perturbations are larger, I mean they have become of the order of unity or even larger than unity, even then these equations hold. Okay. The only approximation which has gone in these equations are the small scale approximation. Okay, I have neglected all the relativistic effects. Other than that, these equations are fully nonlinear. Okay, this is something very difficult to do using general relativity. I mean, it's very difficult to do nonlinear perturbations using general relativity. The formalism does not exist as such. Okay. Remember now what I have written as grad, okay, are actually gradients or derivatives taken with respect to the x coordinate. Okay, that is why I mentioned here, I wrote this as grad r. From now on, all the grads I write will be with respect to the x coordinate. That is why you will see all these 1 by a factors coming in front of the grad and so on. Now up to this is fine. Now comes the next step. So this implicitly assumes that the universe is filled up with a fluid of just one kind. Okay, whatever be that kind. So that fluid has a rho, that fluid has a v, and this phi is just given by the density of that fluid. Okay. But the universe actually, if I start differentiating between dark matter and baryons, so there are two kinds of fluids essentially. One I am calling dark matter, the other I am calling baryons. Okay. The exact difference I will make clear a little bit later. But assume that the universe is made up of two sets of fluids, which are non-interacting, but they are there. So then I have to write equations for both of them. Okay, so there will be one continuity equation for dark matter, another continuity equation for baryons. There will be a continuity equation for Euler equation for dark matter, and then there will be another Euler equation for baryons. Okay, and this one is the most interesting. There cannot be two Poisson equations. Poisson equation just gives the gravitational field. What will happen is on the right hand side. So this is what is Poisson equation telling you? Poisson equation is telling you that if you have some density, it is giving rise to potential. So the potential will be the effect of all the densities in the whatever is present within the universe. So here what will happen is del square phi will be 4 pi g times rho of the first fluid plus the rho of the second fluid. Okay. So if there is dark matter and baryons, instead of 3 equations, you will have how many? 5 equations. Okay. Slightly, I should not say 5, because what you should realize is this is actually 3 equations. This is a vector equation. So this essentially contains 3 equations. Okay. So here actually you already have 5 equations. If you go to the next level, you will end up with 9 essentially. Okay. So I am not writing the equations again. These are same, but you can just write them. So from now on, I will denote the density contrast and velocities of dark matter by this, and similarly for baryons. Okay, and then there is a pressure. Okay, again the average pressure for both of them are 0. Okay, it's only the pressure perturbations which have been accounted for. Now here comes the difference between dark matter and baryons. Dark matter, we know they don't interact with radiation. So these dark matter are essentially what are known as collisionless particles. So there they don't even give rise to pressure perturbations. Okay? So in the dark matter, the pressure term is 0. This is mainly because they don't interact with radiation. Baryons, on the other hand, interact with radiation. So if they come in contact with some radiation which has some temperature, then the baryons will, if they are interacting, the baryons will also get heated up and will essentially get a temperature. Okay? So it will get some random motions and things like that. So that will give rise to pressure. The fact that baryons interact with radiation gives them a pressure term. This is not present in dark matter. Now this is the point where dark matter and baryons are separated. Till now they were following the same equation. In the background cosmology, in the smooth cosmology, they were actually having all same properties throughout. Till now everything was same, but now I have made the distinction. It is just this term which is not present for dark matter, but it is present for baryons. Okay? Fine. So now let us go to the next step. Again, let me just remind you, I haven't yet made the linear approximation. These are still valid even for non-linear cases. Now let us write these equations for, let us say, the dark matter. Okay? So dark matter, this term is not there. Correct? And this one will be, I should put the subscript dm. Okay, this is dm. This is dm. Phi is phi. Here I told you that it should be rho dm delta dm plus rho bar baryon square delta, because this will contain contribution from both. Okay. Now let us see, let us say I want to solve these equations for dark matter. Okay. Now how many equations are there? There are essentially 5 equations, right? 1 plus 3 plus 1, 5. How many unknowns are there? Three. 5, 3. Any other answer? 4. The average. Any other answer? Okay. So let us count. So people who said 3, what are the 3? Then we will add one by one to 4 and to make it 4 and 5. Okay. So what are the 3? Delta. No, delta of what? Delta dm. Okay. Then? Okay. So how many do we have till now? 4. Okay. Anything else? 5. So that makes it 5. Anything else? There's no pressure, right? The dark matter pressure has no. I'm just talking about these equations. So let us say I want to solve only for dark matter. So the question is, can I?
Are the densities of the baryonic fluid known?
Yes, they are known. So let us say we have solved the homogeneous part of the cosmology. Okay. So rho bar and rho dark matter bar and rho baryon bar are known, as well as their evolution.
Is delta B known?
Yes, so that is the question. Okay. So delta B obviously is not known, right? So I have to add this one as well. Okay. So essentially this says that this set of equations cannot be solved. If I want to solve, then I have to write the equations for baryons as well and see whether that can solve the issue. Now let us go ahead and try to see this term. So has Prasoon told you about omega matter, omega baryons? What are the current values? So what is the ratio of, for example, rho dark matter by rho baryon, the average values? At least roughly. Rho dark matter by rho baryon is 10 to the 9. 7 by 3. Yeah, so dark matter and baryons. So what is omega dark matter roughly? 0.3. And what is omega baryons roughly? 0.04. So you will see that this dark matter is of the order of 6 to 10 times more than the baryons. Okay. So this term seems to be larger than this. Of course, we still have to say what is the ratio of dark matter to baryons in the perturbations. Now this, for the moment you have to take my word, later we will see why. What will happen is actually most of the, in large scales, the dark matter and baryons, the overdensities are almost equal. At smaller scales, if at all, the dark matter overdensities are much larger than the baryons. Okay. So even without the overdensities, this term was like 10 times, 6 to 10 times larger. If I take the overdensities into account, this actually becomes much larger than this term. So under that approximation, I can always neglect this term. So then this goes away. And then these equations can be solved without any reference to baryons. Okay? Yeah.
So how do we say that delta dn is much larger than delta?
Okay, so that mathematically it will come later. But what happens is, what is the difference between dark matter and baryon? The pressure term. Okay. Now what happens is, how does, so let us spend some time and understand physically how does these deltas grow. Okay. So whole structure formation depends on whether these deltas grow, right? So if I solve all the mathematics and show that the deltas are always decreasing, then the whole paradigm breaks down. Okay, there is no galaxy formation. So why does delta at all grow? So essentially, let us start with, let us say, the smooth field. Okay, I am plotting rho versus x, and it's, let us say, smooth to start with. Suppose I somehow introduce a small overdensity here. It can be very small. You can name it. Okay. Some quantum effects have given rise to this thing. What will happen is, this is a typical, the peculiar feature of gravity is that if you put overdensity here, it will immediately start attracting mass from here because the gravitational field is higher here. It will start attracting. So if at all, what will happen is, if you just grow a small instability, okay, a small overdensity, it will just grow. It will keep on growing if there is only gravity. If there are other forces, it can be stopped or something can happen. But if there is only gravity which is dominating, this will simply grow. This is known as gravitational instability. And this is how perturbations grow. Similarly, if you have an underdense region, it will become more and more underdense. This is a typical feature of gravity. Okay, of course, this example, the example is based on our Newtonian gravity intuition, but the same thing happens in general relativity if you work out the equation. So there is no difference. So this is how some delta grows. Okay. So when delta grows, which means another way of thinking is, suppose I have some volume of mass. How will delta grow? If I keep the mass conserved, the only way the delta can grow is if it collapses. If it becomes more and more, compact, right? That is only that is the way to grow the density. Okay, keeping the mass same. So this is another way of looking at it. Things starts to collapse if they are overdense. Now, if dark matter is the only, so dark matter, their property is they don't interact with radiation, nothing. The only interaction they have is gravitational. So if they start collapsing, the density, the overdensities will simply start growing. Baryons, what will happen is they respond to pressure support. Okay, so if you try to collapse them more, what will happen is at some point the pressure will resist the collapse. Okay? That is what you see in kinetic theory of gases essentially. You try to push the piston, I mean, some point you cannot, okay, the pressure is too much. So actually, the baryonic overdensities are at some point, they are stopped, okay, but the dark matter can grow, I mean, there is nothing to stop there. So that is why, if at all, I mean, if there is a difference, the difference will actually work in favor of dark matter, okay. In scales where pressure is not important, both will be similar in terms of overdensities, but rho bar will anyway still be high.
So what is the limiting factor to constrain delta T if there is no pressure?
Okay, random motions. Okay, what will happen is if it starts to collapse, at some point the particles will acquire what is known as random motions. Okay, so one particle is moving this way, so it is like pressure, very similar to gas pressure, but it is not arising from any interaction with radiation or anything. Okay, it's just the dark matter particles, they start having random motions, okay, and they will essentially, so that will give rise to pressure. Okay, I mean, or the kinetic energy will give rise to pressure, and that is what can resist. The problem is we have very little idea about what these dark matter particles are, what their masses are, and at which scales this pressure becomes important. Okay, so strictly speaking, there would be a pressure term for dark matter as well, not arising from radiation, but because of their random motion. But that happens at such small scales that, I mean, much smaller scales than where cosmology is important, and we don't even know where that scale is. Okay, it will crucially depend on the properties of the dark matter, but it happens at much smaller scales than what we are interested in. Fine. So now what I have done is, now I have told you that I can actually solve the dark matter without even considering baryons. So that means when structures are forming, the dark matter don't even care whether baryons are there. I mean, there are so much dark matter compared to baryons. The dark matters don't even they don't even know whether there are baryons or not. Okay? At least according to these equations. Okay? They just carry on structure formation on their own. Okay? They don't, I mean, they have nothing to do with baryons. If baryons are there, they are just following dark matter. But the dark matter, because they are dominant and because they don't have to respond to any pressure support, they are the ones which actually give rise to structure formation. Okay? If dark matter was not there, it would be very difficult to form structures as we see today. Okay? Structure formation actually gives you a major indication that dark matter has to be present. Okay? It cannot be done just with baryons. Here? Okay, so fine, we have done this, and in principle you can try to solve this set of equations, except that they are completely non-linear. You will have terms like this, some velocity times density sitting here, and these terms are very complicated. In principle, you can try to put them in a computer and try to solve. And it will be very complicated and it's very difficult to solve even with computers, but in principle it can be solved. There are 5 equations and 5 unknowns, so in principle they can be done. So in the class, what we will do is, we will give you the solutions, again for the linear case, because that is the easiest thing to do. If there is time, I can also tell you that how to approach this problem when things become mildly non-linear. It's beyond linear, but not very non-linear. And then if you have to do the complete non-linear problem, then you have to go to computers and run what are known as n-body simulations. Other than that, there is no way to do the non-linear theory just using equations. So let us do linear theory. So in the first equations, which term can I drop if I want to do linear theory? So linear theory means anything which is perturbation, I will retain only up to first order, linear order. So in the first continuity equation, which term can I drop? Delta into V can be put to 0. Okay, so I can remove this term. Okay, so only divergence dot V will be 0. Okay, you can compare it with the equations we derived in the morning or just the beginning of the class, which we derived using complete relativistic theory. So you will see that this is the same equation. Here, this term is not present. Right hand side is like this, and Poisson equation is already linear. Okay. right hand side of the Poisson equation is often also written like this. So you will be able to show that if you define in terms of omega dark matter and so on, what you will find is that this right hand side will become 3 by 2 h naught square omega m or omega dark matter delta dark matter by A. Okay, if you put the definition of omega dark matter properly, you will end up getting this. Again, these are things you should work out at home.
See, despite the claim that dark matter is responsible for forming the structures,
Right.
by saying that there is much more of it.
Yes.
So how exactly do say normal galaxies, galaxies, how do they form?
Okay. Okay, let me come back to it when I do baryons. Okay. So let us say dark matter is. So what happens is, so dark matters they grow. Okay. So their overdensities grow. Okay. So if there is a region which has very high overdensity, like that what I have drawn, what will happen is if you draw the corresponding potential, you will see that it forms what is known as a potential well. The potential goes very negative. So this is formed by the dark matter. Now baryons just respond to this gravitational effect of dark matter. So if there is a potential well, the baryons will just fall into that potential well. So if there are baryons here, they will also roughly follow the dark matter because dark matter has grown gravitationally and is pulling. So if dark matter grows somewhere, it will pull all the matter towards it. Okay. When it pulls matter, it not only pulls dark matter, it will also pull baryons. So baryons will also collapse. They will be prohibited by pressure, but they will still follow up to the extent they can. They will follow the dark matter. Okay. So that is how the galaxies form. So galaxies are usually, there is a huge dark matter halo, and on the center you will see the galaxy. Okay. And the amount of baryonic mass is much smaller than this huge dark matter halo. But it is there, and it has just responded to the dark matter, the gravitational effect.
So dark matter is like this canvas which allows for the clumping of.
Exactly. So initially, yes. So yeah, but that is the major force which is forming all these structures. So initially, when people didn't know about dark matter, they were actually facing this problem. I mean, they thought that okay, most of the matter is simply baryonic. And then when they tried to solve these equations or tried to run n-body simulations, they found that if you start at early times and run your simulation till today, this is simply not enough structure. They're just not able to form the galaxies that we see today, or the amount of galaxies they need. So that is how we know that dark matter has to be there, indirect way of knowing. Yeah.
So this concept of there being some potential and matter falling into this holds for baryonic matter as well, right?
So to do that, the easiest way of doing is what you can do is you can take, for example, the time you take the first equation, take another time derivative. Okay, you will get a second derivative here. You will get a first time derivative here, v dot. But v dot you know from here. You can put that back. Okay, so you have to do some manipulation, and what you will end up with is a second order differential equation for delta. So I am straight away writing that equation. It tells you that there is a delta double dot plus 2a dot by a delta dot, and that is equal to so again, this equation this is one equation and it contains only one unknown parameter, delta dark matter, and given the initial conditions, you can solve this without any problem. So now you don't have to do anything else. Now again, let us just talk about the physical significance of this equation, you will see that this equation has some similarities with, for example, the harmonic oscillator equation, the second derivative term. Okay? And that is driven by something on the right hand side. Okay? So in other words, more delta dm or omega dm you have, the easier is to accelerate the growth of delta gamma. And this is what I have been talking about. Okay? So dark matter will drive its own growth. If you put more and the more delta grows, this acceleration becomes much more, and it's essentially a runaway process. However, there is a damping term. This is like a damping term. Okay. And that damping is arising due to what? Due to expansion. So if there was no expansion of the universe, this term would have gone to zero. There wouldn't be any at all. Right? Because the universe is expanding, A is changing with time and is positive, this is behaving like a damping term. Okay? So that is also understandable. If you leave some overdensities and let it expand, slowly the overdensity will just go away. There is no gravity to grow it. So that is what is happening. So expansion is trying to damp the growth of structures, but the perturbations themselves are trying to grow. So it all depends on who wins at a given point. Okay, at a given configuration. That's the only thing. But remember the physical significance of this equation. So this is essentially what it is. Now to solve this equation, so delta dark matter, which is essentially a function of t and x, okay, you can try to do some sort of separation of variables. You can write it as some dt times some fx. Okay, and you can put this back in the equation. Since this is linear and only contains time derivatives, what you will see is that this fx will just cancel out. It won't matter, and you will end up with just the equation on D. So what happens is, so fx actually contains the configuration of the, the spatial configuration of the field. Okay? So let us assume that at some early epoch, you had some spatial configuration of the perturbation field. Okay? Here is some overdensity, here is some underdensity and whatever. That is contained within fx. Okay? According to linear theory, after that what happens? Fx, essentially the intrinsic fx remains same. But every space, this thing grows by the same factor. Okay? So at every space, so if there is underdensity, it will go the other way around. Okay? So it will grow by the, if D grows twice, then the underdense regions will become more underdense by a factor of 2, and the overdense regions will become more overdense by exactly a factor of 2.
So this is a consequence of taking co-moving coordinates.
This is more of, no, this is a consequence of not only co-moving coordinates, but linear theory. What it's saying is that the basic configuration does not change. Okay? So what happens is this point does not affect what is happening here. Now that is only true when the perturbations are small. Okay? There is no coupling.
So that is when it separates the function.
Exactly, because there is only linear terms. The moment nonlinearities start playing a role, where you have delta times v and v times delta and all those things, this separation is not possible. Okay? There's something which is known as mode coupling starts to play a role. Okay? And then this thing breaks down. Under linear approximation, this holds. Okay. Now this is a second order differential equation. What you can do is, you know that it has two linearly independent solutions. And for a universe with, let us say, omega, dark matter, omega baryons, omega lambda, and these need not add up to one even, so there could be curvature as well. So if there is a universe like that, you can show that one of the solutions to this equation is nothing but the Hubble parameter. You just put in the Hubble parameter and see whether it solves this equation. It's a peculiar feature that, a universe containing these things, actually for them this thing is called. For example, if you put radiation on that, this may or may not hold true. But if it is just non-relativistic matter and omega lambda, you will see that D is just HA. Now can somebody tell me, I mean if D is HA, whether it is growing with time or whether it is decreasing with time? H, what does it do? It increases with time or decreases with time? It decreases with time. Yeah. So if this is the solution, then what will happen is the perturbations will decrease with time. So if you keep some perturbation, it will just die down. Which means that this is not the solution we want. Okay, it will just make the perturbations go away. So what I want is the other solution. Good thing about second order or differential equations is that if you found one solution, you can always find the other. Okay? So this is essentially based on Wronskians, and you can always work that out. So the other solution, so let me call it D2A or D2D. You will find that the other solution, which is the solution I want, is D1A equal to nothing but H of A, and then this is what you will get if you form the Wronskian and find a solution. Okay, fortunately this one will grow. Okay, at least for the kind of universes which we are interested in, this one grows. So, for example, let us see how much you remember about your smooth cosmology. So suppose I have a universe where there is only dark matter and omega dark matter is 1. Okay? Universe just filled up with dark matter. Okay. Can you tell me how will HA vary with A? What is the dependence of HA on A? Too easy or too difficult? If you want to work on cosmology, these things should be constant. H is constant? Why? Suppose there is a universe which is completely filled up by lambda. Omega lambda is 1. Okay? Then what happens to HA? HA is constant. Okay. If you now calculate D1A, okay, you will find that one will go as A to the minus 2. Okay. So what means is for lambda, the solutions have reversed. Actually, this is the decaying solution, and this is, if at all you can call it, this is the growing solution, which is not growing at all, okay, which is constant. So what it means is that if the universe becomes dominated by cosmological constant lambda, then the perturbations, at least according to linear theory, won't grow at all. Okay, because that constant is the best case scenario, so they can die down if the other solution is dominant, but eventually the growth of the structures will completely stop. Okay, so that is the effect of accelerating universe. The growth of the structures will eventually simply stop. And that is why I was telling in the morning that even if you want to understand the nature of dark energy, probably the next set of constraints will come from structure formation studies, because structure formation crucially depends on dark energy. Okay, so if the universe becomes dark energy dominated, it becomes constant. Of course, at present it is somewhere in between. It It is somewhere, it is of course that means growing slower than A, okay, but it hasn't gone to not growing stage. It is somewhere in between, but eventually, since dark energy will dominate, it will probably go to that stage where there won't be growth of structures. Of course, this is done using linear theory, so this actually won't hold. But qualitatively you can understand, accelerating universe is actually stopping structures from growing. Okay, so that means, suppose there was a universe where it was only dark matter, and suppose there is another universe which is dark matter plus dark energy. What you will see is, in the dark matter plus dark energy, the formation of structures are qualitatively slower, relatively slower compared to if there was no dark. So that is the effect of dark energy on structure formation. So this is something which we have got. So back to our mathematics. So essentially what I will write is delta Tx. I should write it as d1t some f1x and d2t times some f2x. This should be the most general solution. This is linear, I can superpose two independent solutions. As I said that d2t will be the decreasing solution. So even if I start with these two terms being comparable to each other, this term will eventually die out, okay, because this thing is decreasing with time. And as we move along, only this term will survive. So this term will just go away as time progresses. Okay. So I will end up with this, where d1t is just the growing solution. Okay. So from now on, I will not write it as d1 of t, but as d of t, assuming that d of t is the growing solution of this equation. So this equation will have a growing solution and a decaying solution. We are interested only in the growing solution. The decaying solution eventually dies out. It doesn't play a role. Good. Now we have to get back. So this is the growth of densities, but we still have the potential and the velocities hanging. So what you can do is, for solving for the potential, so you have solved for delta, you go back to the Poisson equation. Okay, Poisson equations directly gives phi in terms of delta. So since you have solved for delta, you can actually solve for phi. What you can show is that suppose I define a new potential, let us say psi. By the way, this psi has nothing to do with the psi which we discussed in the morning. This is just a rescaled version of phi. 2 by 3 x to 9 a by d phi. Okay, if you just define this as a new potential, you will see that the Poisson equation just becomes del square psi equal to delta dm by d. Okay, and since delta dm by d is independent of time, because delta dm is growing as d, that essentially means this psi is a constant. Okay, so whatever was the value initially, what was the initial value of psi, it will remain at that value. Of course, phi will evolve by this factor d by a, but that phi which I have defined will remain a constant. This also shows you that if we are living in a dark matter dominated universe, which is omega dark matter equal to 1, then d becomes a, right? Then this term just goes away. In that case, the actual potential just remains frozen. At least at the linear level, linear theory level, the potential does not grow. This is often used, very effectively used in, for example, simulation, where they know that the potential is not going to grow. It's called frozen potential approximation, and that is very helpful in structure formation study. Okay, so we have gotten the so we have gotten the potential as well, and since this is not evolving with time, I will just write it as some psi naught. Okay, del square psi naught, and it's independent of time. The only thing remaining is the velocity equation. So we have to solve for the velocity. So now let us see what do we infer about the velocity. Now the velocity equation is so the velocity appears in two places. One is the continuity equation, one is the Euler equation. Okay. In this case, it is easier to work with the continuity equation. So what is the continuity equation? It is delta dark matter dot plus 1 by A divergence of V dark matter equal to 0. Correct? What is delta dark matter dot? According to this equation, delta dark matter is nothing but D times del square of psi naught. Correct? Okay, where psi naught is just a function of x. It does not depend on time. Time dependence is in D. Then delta dark matter dot is just D dot del square psi naught x. I can put it here. So what I get is A D dot del square of psi naught plus divergence of V dot matter is 0. Correct? This I can write it as divergence of A D dot grad of psi naught plus V dot matter. Okay. So what is V dot matter? What is V dot matter? So I written divergence of something is 0, which contains the V dot matter. So what is V dot matter?
So,
Okay, and that's all?
So,
Yes. So V dot matter, you can write it as minus A D dot grad of psi naught plus some curl term. Okay, I'm calling it as E. You can call it anything you want. Okay, so this is the term whose divergence is 0. Okay, so what you have actually, okay, and what is the curl of this term, first term? Yeah, so now you have seen, I mean, just the way we did, we have actually decomposed the velocity into a curl free term and a divergence free term, okay, which I have been telling you in the morning that it can always be done. Here it has come out very naturally, okay, just by solving the equation. We have just, unintentionally almost, we have decomposed it into the divergence free term and the curl free term. Okay. Now, but here now what has happened is, now I have got a extra term to deal with, okay, which is this V perpendicular. Okay, so I have to now find out what happens to this term. This is some extra term which has come out. So if that term was not there, I would have solved the problem, right? V dot matter in terms of grad psi naught. Psi naught is just the initial condition. So now I have to work out this thing. So now the only equation which we haven't used till now is the Euler equation. Okay, so what you have to do is, you have to just take this form of the velocity, put it in the Euler equation. Okay, Euler equation has a V dot and then there is a 2A dot by A V or something. or A dot by A, V, and then on the right hand side you have phi, but phi you can write in terms of psi and psi naughts and things like that. So if you put it in the Euler equation, you will end up with the equation like this. V perpendicular will be equal to minus A dot by A, or dot will be equal to minus A dot by A, V perpendicular, which will tell you that V perpendicular falls as 1 by V. This will just smoothly come out from the Euler equation if you just put. Now, this is the point I have been again trying to make in the morning as well, that if you have this rotational field or the vector field, even if you have something to start with, it will die down as 1 by A. That is why in cosmology you will rarely see vector perturbation. This perpendicular of the transverse part just falls as 1 by A and it just dies. Even if you start with something, often it is very difficult to source such a field, but even if somehow some perturbations came and the rotational field has formed, it will go away. Okay, so this is the justification of something I said in the morning. So if this term dies down, then we are left with just this much. Okay, so V is nothing but A d dot and some initial configuration. So now I know how phi evolves, the potential evolves. I know how delta evolves for dark matter, and I know how V evolves. So essentially, as far as the dark matter linear theory is concerned, I have solved the problem. Okay. Just for completeness sake, I should also tell you that often people, V dark matter, it is essentially evolving as A d dot. The temporal evolution is like that. Often people write it as AH, ADA, A, BA, HA, in this form. Okay, where FA is nothing but D dot by D by D dot by D. D dot by D by A dot by D. Okay, so if you put that F, you will see that it is giving the same thing. So this is just a historic way of writing. And you will see that this Fa becomes 1 for a matter dominated universe because D is just A then. For other type of cosmology, it is very easy to determine what Fa is because you know what D is. And people will give you formula for that. But this is just for completeness sake. This is one term which you will see in many books. Okay. So this is all what I wanted to say about the linear evolution of dark matter. So whatever time I have, let us spend a bit on what I was saying is the quasi-linear evolution. Does anybody have any doubts or questions in what we have done till now?
So we solved all the equations of dark matter means without using any other parameter of baryonic matter.
Exactly.
So
it does not evolve. Okay, which means that V evolves as A dot, A d dot, right? A d dot. And this again, you can convince yourself that this is actually slower than D. Again, the simplest example will be if you take a purely dark matter dominated case, you will see that V will evolve as A to the half. Okay, when omega dark matter equals to 1. So there is no dark energy, nothing. Then it goes, so that the density field evolves as A, this evolves as A to the half. What it means is velocity evolves slower, which means velocity grows slower than the density. So even when the densities tend to become mildly nonlinear or approaching the nonlinear regime, velocities can still be linear, okay, because they haven't grown that much. They are growing much slower compared to the density perturbation. Now, given this, what people tried is that, okay, so densities, let us say densities have started becoming almost nonlinear or quasi-linear. Density perturbations are of the order of unity. But even when that is the case, let us assume that the velocities are linear. Okay? So if we assume this, then taking this V I had defined it as A times dx dt. Okay, where x, now imagine the dark matter fluid to be broken up into fluid elements, small elements. You imagine something like that. And each of it, the positions of which are given by x. Okay. So V dx dark matter is nothing but A times dx dt. Correct? Where x are the positions of things and nothing, and that is A d dot gradient of psi naught. This is from linear theory. Okay, but I am assuming that velocities will remain linear for longer. So if you just cancel this out, this will have a solution which is some q minus d grad of psi. Okay. What is q? Q is nothing but the initial position of the particle. Okay. So what you do is you integrate this out. Okay, you will find this term plus some constant. Okay. Now I take the limit d going to 0, which is like t going to 0. Okay. And that constant I am calling it as q, which means q is nothing but the initial position of the particle. This is just simple. Okay. So again, if there were no perturbations, that means psi was 0, then x would be q. Okay. So x would be constant. That is like Hubble expansion. Matches with what we understand. But because there is a perturbations, these things will move and move by exactly this factor. Okay. So in other words, you start with some kind of configuration of particles. So you go to some very early epoch. You position your dark matter particles. Okay. You position in such a way that they are almost smooth. Maybe some minor overdensities here and there. Okay. This is like your initial condition. Then you let it evolve like this. Okay. So this is my equation of motion as if. Okay. So x as a function of t is nothing but this. Okay. So this at some later time t will again give me the positions of the particles, and from that I can see whether structures have formed or not. So initially I will have a very homogeneous kind of field. I will just evolve it using this equation. Okay. And actually you will see structures forming. You will see filaments, you will see, okay, which I will show you how to count. But this is something which is very widely used in n-body codes. And this is known as Zeldovich approximation. Advantage of this is, this actually holds true even where delta becomes of the order of few, which means I have crossed the unity limit. I have gone to, let us say, factor of 4 or 5. So it is non-linear, not very highly non-linear. Okay? That is why it is called quasi-linear. And this scheme works very well up to this. And this is based on the fact that velocities tend to remain linear for longer time. So for velocities I am using the linear approximation. I am letting the densities grow. I don't care about density. Now, now psi naught, so now I will be slightly qualitative and tell you how these actually structures form, and there is a nice mathematical way of understanding that. So let us say this is how, given a position q, this is how the particles move. So what you can do is you can write this equation, for example, in component form. So let me just what you can do is you can write this equation in component form. Let us say x alpha t will be q alpha minus dt del psi naught del x del q alpha. Okay, here I am not distinguishing between subscripts and superscripts because it's all happening in flat coordinates. So usually there is a terminology here. In fluid mechanics, these Q's are called Lagrangian coordinates, and this X are called Eulerian coordinates. Why they are called again is a different story. Now the trick is to realize that, okay, these are these fluid particles which had position Q initially and then they were evolving and going to some position X at a later time. The trick is to understand that the number of particles is conserved. I mean, no particles is destroyed. You start with 10 particles, only thing is that their positions will move, so at a given point the densities will change, but the number of particles are still conserved. At the end you get 10 particles somewhere else, but you still get the 10 particles. So keeping that in mind, what you can say is that rho, initial, which is a function of Q over some volume dq, will be rho at some T call it d cube x. Okay. So in other words, there are some particles between q and q plus d cube q initially. Later on, they have moved to some position x plus some d cube x. Okay. Since the particle within that volume is conserved, that volume can be large or small depending on how you define it. Since the number of particles is conserved, then the density times the volume should be same. Okay, whatever be the initial.
So,
Yeah.
in the RFA, shouldn't rho be a function of x?
Yeah, it is a function of x as well. Okay. So now what you can write is this rho Tx is nothing but rho initial of q times the Jacobian, which is d cube q by d cube x. Okay, which is essentially nothing but kind of 3 by 3 matrix. Another way of writing it as, you can write it as some d cube beta by some del x alpha. So this is Jacobian, which will just play a role. This is what you do while you do integration and make changes of variables. It's essentially the Jacobian which plays a role. That is exactly what I have done. Okay. And often this is also written as, you just invert the Jacobian and you can write it as some del x alpha del. Same thing, you will get the same result. Now this has a name, this del x alpha del q beta. This thing, you can imagine this thing will form a 3 by 3 matrix. And this is often called the deformation tensor. This is a tensor of rank 2. And since I know how x is related to q, I can actually write the form. Its form will be nothing but del x alpha del q beta. You should be able to show from that equation is nothing but delta alpha beta. Now this is nothing but the Kronecker delta minus d times del square psi naught del q alpha del q beta. Okay, this will come out from this equation. Sorry? No, as I told you, I am not distinguishing between subscript and superscript because we are working in flat Cartesian coordinates, so it doesn't matter. Okay? So now you will realize is that this deformation tensor first of all is symmetric. Okay? If you change positions of alpha and beta, nothing changes. Okay. Now now the mathematics becomes difficult and now we won't be able to do mathematics. But since this is a symmetric 3 by 3 matrix, what you know is that this will have 3 eigenvalues. Okay. So the 3 eigenvalues, one can write them as something like 1 minus d alpha q, 1 minus d beta q, and 1 minus d some gamma q. Okay, where alpha, beta, gamma are essentially eigenvalues of this matrix. Now, next point will be to diagonalize. So you rotate your coordinate system in such a way that this becomes diagonal. Okay, so you are essentially going to a coordinate system where this deformation, you are just going to the axis of this deformation tensor, 3 axes of the deformation tensor. And then again, I have to skip the mathematics, but you can show that under certain approximations, this rho Px will be rho initial of Q by essentially the Jacobian will be just the the matrix will become diagonal, right? Once we diagonalize it, and then the Jacobian will be nothing but the multiplication of these 3 eigenvalues. And if you do that, you will find that it is 1 minus d alpha, 1 minus d beta, 1 minus d gamma. So alpha, beta, gamma are eigenvalues of this matrix. So initially this term will be very small, right? Initially this is the perturbation term. Correct? So initially this term will be small. So initially what will happen is alpha, beta, gamma, all of them will be very small. So this one will be almost equal to 1. So rho is equal to rho initial. This we understand. Okay. Now what will happen is then d will start growing. Okay, d will start growing. Now let us say that alpha, beta, gamma are ordered in such a way that alpha is the largest, beta is the next smallest, and gamma is the smallest. Now what will happen is as d starts to grow, at some point this term will hit 0. Okay, this was small but slowly it grows and hits unity. So what will happen is rho will go to infinity, okay, but along that corresponding axis where this is going to 0. Okay, rho will go to infinity but it will collapse along that axis. So what will happen is you start with a kind of overdensity. Along one axis you will make it collapse. So what you will form is something called pancakes. A pancake-like structure. So it was a 3D perturbation, but you have collapsed in one direction. So you end up with a kind of 2D structure. Okay, so these are very famously known as Zeldovich pancakes. Okay, and in structure formation simulation, these are the first thing used. So next thing to form will be filaments when this second thing collapses. Okay, this one goes to 0. Okay, then you will have filamentary structures, and then finally you collapse to a point, ideally. So this Zeldovich approximation has many things, although it is not a full nonlinear theory, but it will give you some idea about what kind of structures form first and how they evolve and things like that. So this is a very rich field which one can study, which has been studied quite well. But at some point it breaks down. I mean, the problem with Zeldovich approximation is you move x, I mean you say x is q minus d times something, okay? So you keep on moving x. So what you usually see is if you just evolve using Zeldovich approximation. So this is your something, so a pancake or filament forms, okay? But you keep on moving the particles, right? So what you will see is they will cross, okay? And the pancake will again go back to something, again a kind of spherical structure, which is unphysical. Okay, so when it has collapsed, you have to stop using Zeldovich approximation. Okay? When this goes to 0, the Zeldovich approximation is broken. At that point, you should have some mechanism to stop. That is where you should not use Zeldovich approximation anymore. But till that point, it gives very accurate results. Okay. Now, beyond quasi-linear, if you want to do non-linear, I mean, you have to run what is known as n-body simulations. And there also, Zeldovich approximation plays a role. That is to set up the initial conditions, because you will start the simulation very early. So for initial few time steps, you will move the particles using Zeldovich approximation, which again is very good approximation. And then you let the nonlinear approximation take over, I mean the nonlinear equations take over, and you evolve the system according to whichever way you want. And actually you end up forming collapse structures like galaxies, I mean, or dark matter halos and things like that. Now the good thing about n-body simulations involving dark matter is, as I said, dark matter, they don't care about baryons. So you just put dark matter and just evolve using dark matter. Dark matter don't interact with anything else. At least that we don't know whether it interacts with anything else. So it interacts only gravitationally. So actually the physics in that sense is simple. You have to just put gravitational physics. So you take a box, put in your particles, let them evolve gravitationally, and what you get is what you get. That is the full nonlinear. And for dark matter at least the simulations have progressed very much, and so much that I mean there are various, I mean even there are various public codes available which you can quickly download and run. And I mean, even it runs, nowadays it will run on your laptops. The laptops and I mean computers have become so much advanced. You can very quickly run small simulations and see formation of filaments and structures and so on. So it's otherwise very easy. Writing a code is much more difficult, but running a code is easy. So I will stop here. In the next class, we will start talking about baryons. Okay. So today's class was all about dark matter. Next class we will see baryons, and as I said that at small scales this pressure support starts playing a role. What is it? What am I talking about? So we'll talk about that, and then we'll go to something else later on. Yeah, questions?